talking today with Isaac Tigret, who is best known for his entrepreneurial venture into the Hard Rock Cafe, which he sold several years ago, and is currently working with a project of a musical theme park in Memphis, Tennessee, centered around the backdrop of the Egyptian pyramids. So Isaac, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Pleasure.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about your background with regard to the Hard Rock Cafe, and as we move through that, then we'll talk about your relationship with Sai Baba.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I was born in Jackson, Tennessee, a little country town outside of Memphis. And when I was about 15 years old, I moved to England and went to high school actually in Switzerland. And I was very shy and very insecure, but I had a tremendous love for girls, my age in particular. And I thought, well, if I open a bar, then I'm bound to attract some girls, and I'll get to meet them. So that's what I did. It was an amazing time back in the 60s, for those of us that are old enough to remember. It was a very exciting time because it was the time of the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, and a whole social order was changing in America. This is when we had our famous generation gap. And these were my heroes. I was a fan of Hendrix and Cream and all the great groups at the time. So I called the place the Hard Rock Cafe, sort of in honor of my heroes at the time. And we opened it in London on Hyde Park Corner, and the rest of the story is pretty famous now. I didn't realize at the time that it was such a Sai Baba behind me, but from the day that we opened the business, there was a queue formed, and that queue has been there, a line to get in. And it's been there for 20 years.
What made the Hard Rock Cafe different than other similar eating establishments?
Well, it was the first restaurant in the world to sort of adore our cultural heroes, be it the Beatles or Dylan or Hendrix and so forth. And when I opened the place, these are the people that frequented it. The Beatles would be sitting over in one corner and the Stones over in another, and it was very, very exciting. And of course, when everybody heard that this was their hangout, they wanted to be there too. So suddenly, everybody was coming there, and it was a very, very exciting time. It was, I guess, about 2 or 3 years later after I opened the Hard Rock that I felt that there was something. I'd had such an incredible life. I was only 20 when I opened the Hard Rock, so it was very exciting to be so young and have so much attention. But I always had felt that there was something more in life than what I was getting out of it. And I took a trip to India, I guess, back in 1974. And while I was here, I actually was working on a project. I'd been interested in metaphysics since I was a young man, and I received sort of these psychic messages is the only way I can describe them. And I received one that said, "Buy the secret life of plants," and I didn't know what that meant. And about 2 weeks later, I picked up Newsweek magazine. Here was an article about parapsychology and psychic phenomena, a book actually that had come out. It was in the book section, on a book called The Secret Life of Plants. It became, after I bought the rights, I immediately picked up the phone and called the authors and said, "I want to buy the theatrical rights to your book." And they said, "Well, did you read where did you hear about us?" And I said, "Well, I read about you in Newsweek." And they said, "Well, the article said don't buy the book." I said, "I know, it's what it said, but I feel like I should." And they said, "Well, let's do it." And they thought it was a failure at that point. Harper's and Row had come out with the book, and to make a long story short, after I bought the book, it hit the bestseller list and stayed there for, I think, 65 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. And the next thing I knew, people in Hollywood were calling me, and I went out to see the then head of Warner Brothers. I can't remember his name now. He's now with Disney. And they wanted to do this book on parapsychology and psychic phenomenon. And Stevie Wonder became my partner, the singer, and he in fact did the soundtrack for the film that was made. And I was blessed to be able to travel around the world visiting all the phenomena that were in the book. And from university type of situations, Johns Hopkins and Duke, UCLA, the Sorbonne in Paris, and other places where they had been studying parapsychology. And when you met all these sort of freaky characters, and you said, "Well, what's the source? So where is the energy coming from? And where are these messages coming from that some of us are lucky enough to receive?" And They said, well, you better go to India. They've been at it there for a long time. So off to India I went with a crew and so forth. And we were doing research for the film script itself. And I was in a place called Aurangabad. And I was sitting in the lobby, a hotel lobby, and I know it sounds sort of off the wall, but suddenly I heard someone calling my name, and it was inside of my head. It wasn't outside of me. And I started shaking my head, and I looked up, and on the wall in the lobby there was a picture of this man in an orange robe with big hair. And I had no idea. We'd done research on all the masters in India, and for some reason, Sai Baba had not been brought up, so I did not recognize this figure. I immediately asked someone, who is Sai Baba? And they said, well, he is probably the greatest guru, a holy man in India, and the people that have this hotel are devotees. And I said, well, where do I find him? Because I think he's calling me. And I immediately came down to Whitefield, and I was just there for a day, and he came out, and there was a big crowd, and I didn't know what to do, really. I was just standing there against the wall at the back, and he parted the crowd and came over and made his famous devotee for me. And I guess my life started to change at that particular time.
After you met Sai Baba, how did it influence your work with the Hard Rock Cafe?
It changed everything. I've always been in love with people. I adore them, and I guess being in the public service business, it was a natural thing for me to go into. Of course, I came here to Puttaparthi, where we are right now, which is exciting on the 65th birthday. I came here for 15 years without Sai ever really looking at me or talking to me, and was in the darshan line and so forth. Always, and in the canteen. I noticed, this was in 75, I noticed in the canteen a little wooden sign that said, love all, serve all. And this struck me as being everything that being in the service business is about. So I started putting it on matches and T-shirts and jackets and everything that we sold at the Hard Rock. And some of you may have a watch or a hat or something somewhere out there that says, love all, serve all. And that's the type of thing that influenced my business. Also the way that I interacted with my staff, and I used to get up and give them speeches about Sai Baba and so forth, and bring them all the little red books and that sort of thing. It was so exciting to me 15 years later when I had my first interview with Sai Baba, having now put the words love all, serve all on probably over 40 million items that we've sold or given away. The first thing he said to me is, how do you get to God? And of course, when Sai speaks to you, you immediately so tremble. He's so exciting to be with. And I didn't say anything. No, in my first interview, the first thing he said to me. And I didn't say anything. He asked 2 or 3 other people, how do you get to God? How do you get to God? And then he leaned over and almost screamed in my ear, love all, serve all. So I had known at that moment that he had been with me, which I always suspected, but that he knew that what I was doing, what I was up to. And that's how you get to God, that's for sure.
Now that you have sold the Hard Rock Cafe, what new ventures are you doing, and is Swami interacting with these ventures as well?
Well, I now realize, especially coming from the West, where we don't have any great religious figures, where we are inundated with so much media and television, advertising, and so forth. And it's very difficult to even find someone that you look up to or respect. Now, Sai, once he comes into your life, really guides you with his wondrous love and amazing power to help you. The idea of him being omniscient is, one of the most difficult things to contemplate. We're so limited, and how can this little fellow be part of the universal consciousness everywhere at once? Now, there's a gentleman just in the room a minute ago, Gary Bells, and we had this conversation one night, and he said, I just can't understand how Sai can be omniscient everywhere at once. And I said, well, I can't either. I'm very limited. And we discussed it a little while, and he went to sleep. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, he woke me up, and he said, "You're not going to believe it." He said, "I've just had this amazing dream, and Sai was here, and he told me all about enlightenment, and he put a garland over me, and he had my mother and father sitting over here, and he had my family, my wife and kids sitting over there, and it was just incredible. And I just had to tell you about it." And I said, "Oh, it's great. Go on back to sleep." And he did, and we woke up the next morning. We were blessed to be called in for an interview together. And Sai Baba turned to him and said, "Last night you had a dream about me. I garlanded you. Your parents were sitting over here, and your family was sitting over there. Then you woke up, and you woke up Tigret and told him about it." "I know, I was there." And of course, both of us just couldn't believe, these divine manifestations and miracles and awareness that he's constantly filling his devotees with this love and this amazing phenomenon we call Sai Baba.
One of the areas that we're interested in exploring with interview with you and other people is the guidance that people feel they receive from Baba. There are a number of ways in which the guidance can come to people, whether it's directly, verbally, or internally, or through dreams and so forth. What are some of your most memorable experiences in that line?
Well, I've been blessed to have probably some of the most extreme, I couldn't call them guidance, but although I have received and do continue to receive guidance, and hopefully all the time I'm egoless enough to hear it, but I've had a couple of experiences where Sai literally saved my life by appearing in the flesh. Once was an automobile accident in 1976 where I went over a cliff, and next thing I knew, I was in the car, a Porsche Targa, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I fell asleep on the Sunset Strip doing about 80 miles an hour, and this car leaped off of this cliff, and the next thing I knew, I woke up, and the car started to spin, and suddenly I felt this arm around me. It was a convertible car, and there was Sai holding me in my seat as this car tumbled over 7 or 8 times. It was completely destroyed. I couldn't believe it. I immediately got on a plane to India, and of course sat in the darshan line. He paid no attention to me whatsoever. About a year or so later, I was being in the trade that I was in. I was exposed to drugs and things like that, and one particular drug I'd been taking caused an epileptic fit in a hotel room in Denver, Colorado, at the airport. And I literally swallowed my tongue, and I went into a fit where I couldn't even move my hand to my mouth to pull my tongue out. And I died. And the spirit came right out of the top of my head, and like you read about, you're sort of looking at your body from some other space. I was sort of a form of electricity, and I knew I didn't have to die if I called Sai's name. So I called his name, and the next thing I know, this red robe flashes in front of me and pushes on my chest of my body, and I re-enter my body, and I couldn't believe it. He saved my life, and he was gone. He wasn't even there. And again, went back to India and sat in the darshan line, and he paid no attention to me whatsoever. Now, that was 1977. We're now in 1990, and I was here 6 weeks ago at Whitefield, working on a hospital project with Sai with a lot of gentlemen. And suddenly Sai said, "I saved this man's life twice." This is some 15 years later. And he said, "Right?" I said, "Yes, Swami, yes. And then he leaned over to him and he said, "And many other times too," which I'm also aware of, but of course him not being there. But it's miraculous. It's beyond comprehension. And if you're blessed to have the guidance of one of these divine masters in your life, it is the greatest blessing you can have.
How many times have you had the opportunity to come to India and see Baba?
This is my about 21st or 22nd visit. I've been coming every year since 1974, sometimes twice a year.
One thing that we're interested in is that a number of devotees have experiences where they'll come to see Swami with a particularly strong desire for Swami to fulfill, and find that maybe in some way he ignores them, and that they begin learning through the process of being ignored. Were there ever times that you felt ignored by Swami?
15 years. But at the same time, that's with the form. If you if you get involved with a form, you certainly expect a lot. Everybody wants an interview. Everybody wants to be healed. Everybody wants something. That's what brings them here. Their curiosity. Of course, Sai is really the man that brings them here. Everybody wants something, but as an old Rolling Stones song, you may not get what you want, but you get what you need. And that's what Sai gives you. I think that part of the whole process, and of course now my dream is maybe someday I can reach another state of consciousness myself, even if it's a tiny one, is that you have to destroy the ego. And that's sort of hard to understand. I mean, Sai made for me on this first interview a beautiful diamond ring, which he's now changed into another ring. But as he's famous for saying, he said, "Diamond?" And I said, "Yes, Swami." He said, "No, diamond." And it's taken me some time to understand what that means. We are all divine beings, which he has taught us. It's the spark that's inside of us. But you have to be very quiet to hear that divine being speaking to you. And if you can still the mind of the ego, then you have an opportunity to get direct guidance from the guru within.
What brought you to the 65th birthday?
Sai Baba told me to come. So I am here, just as he told me to move to California and sell my business, and which I did.
How did he tell you that?
Well, I had an offer for my business, and it was the last thing in the world I wanted to do was sell my business, because I felt that it was his, and I felt that he was behind it and had been behind it. His photographs are in all the hard rocks that I opened. I had an ex-partner who's not a devotee. He opened a couple of hard rocks that don't have the pictures. I know that Swami was always there, and especially when he told me he'd been there, it was confirmed to me. But I meditated literally, is this what I should do? Is this what you want me to do? And the answer came back, yes. So I sold it, and it's the best thing I ever did, because now I'm on my next stage in life. And
And moving to L.A., how did you get that guidance? Same way?
Yes, he actually told me in the flesh. He said, "You moved to Los Angeles." So I did.
You had an interview?
Yes.
And any other forms of guidance, the dreams, for example, where you
Oh my goodness.
messages there?
Well, I think anyone can tune in. I work with a lady named Phyllis Crystal, which Sai Baba told me to move to California and work with this lady. And I thought I was going to be doing some kind of businessman's work. And now this is a very fine devotee who teaches a certain form of meditation. And I've been doing that about 3 days a week for the last year and a half. And I've gotten to the point in my meditations where I can get direct guidance from the guru within. So hopefully we'll always receive that as long as I'm tuned in. And anyone can do it. It just takes practice.
So what's next for Isaac Tigret?
Well, I'm working on a hospital project here for such a Sai Baba. That's correct. And in fact, a few of the doctors will be arriving this afternoon, and the President of India is coming down to lay the foundation stone on the 21st, or the 22nd, right before the birthday. I'm working on a project you mentioned in Memphis, Tennessee, which Swami has also encouraged me to work on, where we're duplicating the Great Pyramid Cheops, which is in Egypt on the banks of the Mississippi River. And inside will be the American Music Awards, which are making that their home, which I've arranged with Dick Clark. The College Football Hall of Fame will be there. There will be the famous Hard Rock Cafe. And it's going to be a really fun, interesting place for folks to come and experience music, especially the heritage of Memphis music, which is where the blues was originated, gospel music, rock and roll, and rhythm and blues. And that's the project. I mean, people say, well, Swami certainly doesn't like rock and roll. Well, probably about 20 million people have received darshan from the photographs of Sai in the hard rock. He is everywhere. In fact, I think one of the sweetest things he said to me, he said, "Where is God?" I said, "He's in my heart." He said, "No. Your God is everywhere. It's like a fish swimming through water. The water is above, around, below, and inside. And you are a fish swimming through God." And that is, I guess, was also a turning point in my understanding of the omniscient power as much as one can understand this limited form that we're in mentally. And those words have probably been a guide for me ever since I received them from him.
In coming into contact with Swami, each of us, I think, hit certain challenging points when we're working on our own side and our own spiritual growth. Is there anything along these lines you would share with us about your own challenges and what you're working on to improve your spiritual life?
Well, you have to define your spiritual life sometime in your life. In many cases, people, and especially in today's sort of irreverent, irreligious age, which is a very dark age of man, really, people don't really receive a lot of religious guidance and so forth. And they never really consider defining their spirituality until they come against death, or they get very old and they realize their mortality is about to happen. And I guess everybody in their own time, but to receive it when you're young and to put it in your life and to put the practices in your life, the results are phenomenal. Sai Baba has guided me as he's guided all of us, and again given us just what we need. And as he says himself, follow your own chosen God. He doesn't say that he is the only God, or in fact he told me the first interview as well, so I'm a messenger of God. And I think that whatever your religion may be, if you practice the teachings and follow the moral codes of that religion, that it will make your life very secure and give you great blessings.
You met all these rock stars and everything like that. I mean, how do they compare to like being with Swami?
How is worldly life spiritual life?
Well, I think you can combine the two. I have been blessed to meet the heroes of our times, at least for young people. I've entertained them. I spent 20 years backstage or in the van to the gig or at the studio or somewhere. And it's been a real thrill, to be with those folks because they are the heroes of our times. However, it's a very limited sort of thing. It never gave me the satisfaction that obviously my spiritual life has. But it's interesting to see that a lot of those people are sort of lost in that world. They are sort of more victims than their fans would realize. If you get too much attention in life, it can stymie your growth. Take it from me.
Who were some of the people that you've come in contact with, just to name a few names?
Well, who I haven't come in contact with. Last week I was with Dan Aykroyd. In fact, the Blues Brothers have played the Hard Rock many, many times in their band. I know all the Beatles. I know practically every rock star, lots of actors and folks like that. Many of them I've talked to about Sai Baba, and in fact I think Dan Aykroyd's planning on coming down here sometime next year. So it's a search that even someone that's a superstar is looking for fulfillment that he hasn't gotten from all the cash and adulation and so forth. It holds them back. And many of them are searching, many of them.
In your own case of being very financially successful, world of success, how did you avoid the trap that we often hear rock stars falling into?
I didn't. I didn't. I went through it. I've had a very serious drug life for many, many years. I lived the same. It seemed to be fun at the time, and I had no tremendous regrets about it. Mainly because as Sai became part of it, and of course I had a hamburger restaurant. I was the black sheep of devotees for many years. They're saying, hey, Sai doesn't approve of this or that, but he is everywhere, and he's in everybody and everything. So I sensed that even when I was in that world and in that scene. He was always there with me. As he said, I've saved your life many times.
Thank you.
My pleasure.